Alright, so we're going to continue talking about the immune system, but today we're going to be focusing on that second part, the specific responses of your immune system. So if you guys remember last time we focused on the non-specific immune system, meaning we did not know the identity of our invader, whether it was a virus or a bacteria, or even like what species of bacteria was invading. Today though we're going to focus on specific, meaning we are going to determine the pathogen, the specific type of pathogen invading the body. Here are the major structures we kind of went over last time, but we have the lymphatic system, we have the spleen, lymphocytes, remember it's a fancy word for white blood cells, and specifically we're going to be talking about B cells and T cells today. B cells mature in bone marrow starts with B cells, T cells will mature in the thymus starts with T cells, that's the way to remember those. So in order for the specific response to be initiated, we need to recognize that pathogens. So we have millions of different white blood cells. You can see here, here's some lymphocyte here. And on the outside, those red little projections sticking out, those are receptors. And every type of white blood cell has different receptors. And those receptors are only specific to one type of antigen. Perfectly fits like a lock and a key. Remember, antigen is any sort of foreign substance that enters the body. You can see the antigens presented here, these little green markers. And only one red receptor will bind with one specific antigen. And when that occurs, that means we have now figured out our specific invader. Once this occurs, we have now identified our specific invader and we can begin to attack this pathogen. There are two different attacks that will occur. There's something called the cell-mediated. This means we need to kill invaders, the pathogens that have now entered our body cells. But at the same time, there's also something called the humoral response, and we need to kill invaders that have not invaded our body cells, but are still inside the body, they're just waiting to attack. So this is called a two-part attack. Cell-mediated is going to focus on something called the killer T cell. The humoral response is going to focus on the B cell production, where we start to make antibodies. Before either of these two can happen, there's something called the initial response that needs to happen first. So the initial response occurs where we have a macrophage, a type of white blood cell, that is going to engulf our pathogen. So let's say that's a little bacteria there. The pathogen is then decomposed, and we're going to then present the bacteria's antigens on the surface of that white blood cell. It's going to wait around until the specific white blood cell that matches has the exact same receptors that can bind with that specific antigen. At this point, that T cell will release a chemical. We're not going to get into all the details of this, but the chemical is called interleukin-2. Once interleukin-2 is released, then our two-part attack can occur, the humoral and the cell-mediated responses. So remember, the cell-mediated response is killing pathogens that have already invaded our body cells. So there's something called the cytotoxic T cell. Here's a picture of one there. It's going to go and find any body cells that have been invaded with this pathogen. So you can see here's a body cell, maybe like a throat cell, it's invaded with the virus. And what that cytotoxic T cell is going to do is it's going to burst that body cell. It's going to kill it. So yes, in this instance, we are killing our body cells, but at the same time, we are killing the pathogen inside that has now no ability to reproduce and infect nearby cells. So during this time, this is where you would feel ill because we're obviously killing body cells. At the same time, though, pathogens maybe are still outside body cells that are still circulating in the blood, and we need to go and find these guys and attack them before they can invade any more body cells. So we have our plasma cells, a specific type of white blood cells that produce a very important structure called antibodies. Antibodies are a Y-shaped protein, you can see them here, and what they're going to do is they're going to bind to the antigens of that specific pathogen. In this case, it was a bacteria. And when it binds, it's going to clump up these pathogens in one big group, and when they bind, it's going to deactivate the pathogen so it cannot then enter any body cells. These are very, very important. So now clumps of these pathogens will occur, and a macrophage can easily come by and just gobble up these pathogens, and now they are killed and cannot infect any other body cells. At this point, your body has now learned how to create a weapon to kill this specific pathogen. and you have memory cells, another type of white blood cell, that's going to store that information about that specific pathogen. We now know how to make that specific antibody to kill that pathogen if it ever gets into the body again. So if you are exposed a second time, memory cells will immediately recognize this, create all these antibodies really quickly, and kill them all before they hopefully enter any body cells and make you sick. You wouldn't even know this is occurring. So we have what's called the primary and secondary immune response. So the primary response is the first time you ever encounter this pathogen. We can see down here antibody concentrations on our Y, time is on our X. So the first time you're exposed to this pathogen takes you a little bit of time to figure out how to make that antibody. You're sick during this period right here. You figure out how to kill them, and the antibodies go away because the pathogen is now dead. Later on, a few years later, that exact same strain of bacteria or whatever you come into contact with, notice how quickly you make those antibodies and how much. So the second time you're exposed, you won't even know the pathogen's inside. You kill them off quickly, you never even get sick. This is why kids when they're younger are really sick. Like my daughter always has a cold or runny nose. However, I'm not always getting that cold and runny nose because I've already been exposed to those when I was a child. So I have my secondary immune response in effect and killing off those pathogens for me. So your next assignment is to complete the notes check that goes with this. In addition, you can watch this video. I also have a link separate and an assignment with the video notes to complete as well. If you have any questions, visit virtual office hours. My office hours are posted on Google Classroom.